Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortified Life podcast, where we are passionate about developing a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. Every week, we have the opportunity to bring on authors, speakers, coaches, leaders of nonprofits, all who are passionate about putting God back in business. And this week, it is no different, folks. I am very excited to have a friend of mine, Ash Merchant. Before I begin the conversation, let me tell you a little bit about Ash. Ash Merchant is a business advisor, coach, and senior executive fluent in a diverse range of topics in human capital, risk management, total rewards, and workplace trends and diversity. He currently serves as the founder and president of Lionheart Partners, a firm specializing in advisory services, leadership development, and executive coaching for clients in the U.S. and around the world. Ash has successfully built a reputation of coaching and developing others while also taking exceptional care of client relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Fortified Life, Ash Merchant. Ash, what's going on, sir?
Hey, Jason, great to be with you today, brother. Nice to see your face and glad we could spend this time together.
Absolutely. It's always good to see you, Ash. Ash, when people take a look at your bio, and it's actually, folks, it's even more extensive than what was shared. But when you look at all of that, Ash, we know that you just didn't wake up in 2026 and you're coaching and talking about the client experience. We know there's a journey there. So talk to us about your professional journey.
Yeah, happy to do that. And it's funny you're asking me this question because I over Christmas break, I had a chance to have a somewhat vulnerable and if not an open and transparent conversation with my wife about. I said, I was thinking about this the other day that I get restless, dare I say, bored every 10 to 12 years with whatever it is that I'm doing professionally. And as I sort of mapped back to the beginning of my career to now, my first 10 years in the work world were in the world of recruiting and talent acquisition and contingent labor, staffing, and I loved that industry. It was a noble purpose industry and just something that I have even to this day held on to the passion for employment and work and helping
Hmm.
people think about that differently or think about what their career trajectory is. But when I got out of that industry, I spent the next 12 to 13 years in the world of benefits, total rewards, compensation, HR professional services, risk management, and that world, excuse me, of business where I was basically helping corporations navigate their risk management strategies and their benefit strategies and what we call total rewards around all things around retirement and talent planning and those types of things from a professional services standpoint. And I finished my corporate career in the world of risk management. So think about all things around commercial insurance and property and
Hmm.
casualty and those types of business exposures. My wife approached me in 2016 and 2015, 2016 timeframe and said, "Hey, I've got an idea, and this will lead to my next career pivot." She said, "I have an idea. What if we were to travel in an RV?" And Jason, the idiot that I was, I thought she was talking about a vacation. I thought she was talking about maybe a week, a couple of weeks, maybe. And and I very quickly blurted out, "Sure, that sounds cool," thinking, "Okay, this is an unusual idea, but okay, I can run with it." And Beth has a very disapproving or look on her face where she's like, "No, you're not hearing me. I'm talking about us doing life on the road." And
Mm.
and I was just in some level of stunned silence at that point because I thought, I'm an executive. I've got this great job. I got a big bumper around my bumper car. And you know that thing that shows up every couple weeks in our bank account and that bigger thing that shows up every year, that really sort of evaporates under this scenario, what you're talking about here. Um, Long story short, we through prayer and conversation and frankly a wrestling match that I had with God about it was we finally arrived to that. Yeah, we were going to take what I now call a mid-career gap year, and I left the corporate world in June of 18, and we were on the road and we were living in a fifth wheel camper for a little over a year, and from June of 18 to July of 19. And then upon return, I decided to launch Lionheart Partners, which is the firm that I run now, and focused on leadership development, executive coaching, and just advisory services to companies. So when I look back on the math of, okay, every 10 or so, 10, 12 years, I'm looking to make a change or I get a little bit restless about the current model that I'm in.
Mhm.
That really does fit the timeline here. Now, having said that, I'm about to start year 8 in all of this, and so I'm trying to be mindful of, I wonder if it's going to be any different this time. My suspicion is now that I've taken an entrepreneurial road, this is work, first of all, that I love doing, and then second of all, I could see me doing for quite some time.
Mm. Wow. Ash, that's awesome, man. And I love you were blending a few different topics there. One, just bringing, I think this is important for couples too, because a lot of times, Ash, as you know, I'm sure when you're coaching people, because they get vulnerable, they look at the professional life one way and the personal another, and you and your wife's case it was a team sport and obviously financial and family impact, but look at the flourishing and satisfaction that came out of it. And so connecting, leaving corporate, taking the professional gap year. I love that. I might have to steal that from you. Professional gap year, and then out of that, launching into entrepreneurship. Can you just talk about Ash just being a man that's not thinking single threaded because there's probably some other people who might have made a different decision along the lines of what you and your wife were thinking about doing. So just expound on that because that takes being on the same page.
Yeah, it was really a multi-year arc of a decision
Okay.
that was made. So to be fair, this was not something that we just had one conversation and then all of a sudden, poof, we were moving on to setting
Hmm.
up the logistics of this thing. From the point at which Beth brought the idea to me to the point we actually pulled the trigger was almost a 3-year period.
Okay.
And I would tell you that the delay in the thinking, or perhaps the delay in the decision, was largely a wrestling match that I had to have about my own identity, because
Mm,
the very same God that had blessed us with an abundance and had put that big bumper around our bumper car, when I was actually faced with a potential scenario of scarcity around that, scared me to death.
mm,
And so there was that piece of it where
mhm,
I wasn't fully trusting that, okay, God's got this, so let me rest in that comfort. I wanted to take the control of the reins back so hard on it. And then the second piece was my own identity was wrapped up more in what I did for a living versus who I was reflecting in what I did for a living. So I had that
mm,
equation completely backwards. And to give it to you in some context, when you're at a professional services firm, the pinnacle at which when you hit partner, or even in some cases senior partner at a professional services firm or managing director, if you want to call it that, whatever the nomenclature is, whatever the title is, when you hit that certain level, you have arrived,
mm,
and I was a partner and I was a senior VP and a managing director and all those fancy other fun titles that nobody really contextually cares about. And yet I had put so much value in that. It's like I had bought my own press and I was drinking
mm,
my own Kool-Aid around, I'm a pretty big deal and how can I give that up? And and the reality was, that's not at all what God intended us for us to be. He
Yeah.
wants us to bring our whole self, and he wants us to bring our gifts and our talents and stand on the platform that he puts us on and use those gifts and talents, whether you're making $50,000 a year or whether you're making $500,000 a year. And that was such an eye opener for me of how much I was wrapped up in the the success part of the equation, and I had completely ignored the significance part of the equation.
Oh, that's good, Ash, from success to significance. What advice, having walked through that process, Ash, what advice would you give to other professionals out there who may be struggling with, you know what? If I really think about it, my identity is like I am what I do. What advice or wisdom would you give to the person struggling with that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one often that when I spend time with my clients, and particularly those that have either been in roles for a while or they've just been in business for a while, the thought of retirement and stepping away from that scares them to death because they have nothing
Mm,
else. And they haven't developed either social networks or they haven't even developed what their own what their own disciplines and their routines of self-care are, whether it's volunteering, whether it's giving back, whether it's mentoring, whether, you fill in the blank on what those things are. So the encouragement I give people is you don't have to do it in the same way that we did it and our family did it. We did it in a fairly dramatic fashion where we took a year and we stepped away and were, you know, figuratively off the grid. This is a mindset shift. This is a change in heart posture that people have to make around just saying, you know what? I'm going to worry less about the material significance and
mm,
the success definitions and focus more on how am I impacting others, whether it's the people that I work with, whether it's the people that work directly on my team, whether it's my clients, whether it's my bosses on high. How am I operating from a posture of service and servant leadership and all the things we talk about in traditional business circles, but it's less about hitting a milestone marker and it's more about the impact and it's more about am I leaving that person better after they've interacted with me than had they never met me at all? And just getting people to think a little differently about things because ultimately what, I have conversations from time to time with people about legacy. And some people hate that
mm,
word because they think this means your name's got to be in lights or your name's got to be on a building or it's
yeah.
it's just this weird recognition. Legacy has nothing to do with that or money or anything
Mm,
like that. Legacy has everything to do with what are people going to remember of how you spoke into their life and how you touched
mm,
them as a person, how you impacted them, how you walked alongside them during a difficult season of their life? That's the stuff that good legacy is built on rather than, hey, I came up with this whiz bang XYZ blibbity blop process that nobody else came up with. Nobody cares. And 100 years from now, they're really not going to care.
mm-hmm. Wow. I appreciate your transparency, Ash, and that's some solid wisdom. That's gold right there for others who may be dealing with identity issues in the workplace. And so, Ash, when you and your wife coming off, I think the kids maybe, I think they call it the van life, the RV. I think that's like what some people call it. What were you able to carry forward into launching Lionheart? Like, was there any epiphany or something that the Lord revealed while you're out with your wife, you're on and kids, and you're on the road, and you're like, you know what? I don't think I would have come back to the market. I came back to the marketplace differently because of X, Y, and Z. What would those things be that you gained from being on the road?
I'll tell you, there's so many nuggets of wisdom we picked up on the road, but I would tell you that one of the biggest ones was what role does work play in my life
Mm,
versus the rest of my life? And I want to just unpack that a little bit, where
yep.
I think about my younger son, Nate, who's now 13. When we were on the road, Nate and I were the two. early risers. So he and I would often be the ones who had breakfast together. And with very little exception, I probably had that portion of the day with him every day for a long period of time. Now, if I translate that back to could I have done that? So I live in North Atlanta and I was traveling into Buckhead every day for my work.
Mhm.
And so for me to beat the traffic demons, I'd have to be out the door usually before anybody woke up or right around the time when people woke up. And so the thought of re-entering corporate America, working for a firm or working for somebody else where I'd have to either commute into an office or get on a plane where I'd be in New York every week or in London every couple months or in Chicago for work or whatever it was, those were trade-offs that I wasn't wanting to make or willing to make upon reentry. So this whole idea about building your work life around your life priorities, that was a
Mm.
big aha for me because I grew up and frankly, I spent a lot of time in my career uh, really sacrificing self-care and sacrificing even time at home and perhaps even leisure time in pursuit of bigger work goals and bigger work ideals. And upon reentry, I knew that I had a door wide open to go back to the corporate life. And it would have been
Mhm.
a great life. It would have been a very fine life. And I'm sure would have solved for a lot of things in our life. But I also know what the trade-off was going to be.
Mhm.
And upon reentry, I frankly wasn't willing to make the trade. It wasn't worth as much as it once was to me. Now, the flip side of that is I was still young enough when we got back. I came back a day before I turned 50, and I knew that I was going to work for a number of more years. I wanted to make sure that my contribution in the marketplace was still going to be able to use my gifts and talents while also honoring what else could I do at home to make sure that I was practicing servant leadership at home.
Mm. Wow. That's powerful, Ash. Um, Ash, out of all those lessons with the family, and I love that, just waking up you and your son at breakfast. On the practical side, I'm very curious, Ash, after the trip and you decide to go the entrepreneur route, I was curious with your wife, was she kind of like, oh, was she like, was this great? And now that you're starting the thing, was there further conversations around financials? Because Ash, as you know, so many people, they're trying to make a decision how to transition, and now you're in client acquisition mode, and so what was that process of, okay, we did that, starting Lionheart Partners. What was the family conversation like, okay, guys, in order for this to work, and I love how you painted this earlier, there was a decisioning process, framework per se, that went into going on the road. What was it in going into entrepreneurship? And hey, family, if I do this, this is what this now means. Many positives, but there's some things I need to ensure that, and I need the time and space and energy to do so that we can do more of what we like. What was that conversation like?
Yeah, it was not a light conversation by any stretch. And I would tell you that my wife Beth is my biggest cheer was and is my biggest cheerleader on running a business like this because
Hmm.
she was 100% supportive from the beginning because not because there was some huge financial payout coming out of the gate, but it was more about she saw where I would light up when it came to talking about work and talking about the contribution of what Lionheart could actually have in the marketplace. She saw that level of excitement and she's like, you know what? Let's let's give it a go and
Mm.
let's see how. I mean, at that point, I was of the opinion that if the worst case scenario for me is I've got to go find a job and go work for somebody else, there's plenty of good jobs that were out there and ones that I would have enjoyed and thrived in. If that's my worst case scenario, that's not really a worst case scenario by any stretch. That's just an
Right.
additional option. And so I took great comfort in that. So The answer to your original question was really falling in two parts. One is once we decided that the entrepreneurial route was going to be there, and yes, there was going to be some sacrifice that we'd have to make, and things were going to be lean, and there was that. But then 7 months after we decided this is what we're going to do, the world is in the middle of a pandemic,
Oh man. Yeah.
which which really sort of upended the whole conversation because right around the time and the kind of work that I do, and I know even some of the work that you do, it's we love the face-to-face and the in-person interaction. There's just something about being in the room with your clients. There's just something about being with people one-on-one or in group settings where you can feel the vibe. It's just different than doing it via Teams or Zoom because in 2019, when Zoom and Teams and really 2020 is when it all took off,
Mhm.
um, we would use video technology in fits and starts, but it never became the necessity that we needed it to be. And that was really worrisome for me as a business owner launching a business like this because I thought, man, I hate this. This is
Mm.
this is not how I like to operate.
Yeah.
And at the same time, God was so good to put customers in my wake and allow me to form and forge partnerships to be able to at least launch the business and get it up and running so that by the time we did, in fact, get out of COVID, I was able to uh, build on some tailwind momentum that had been created in 20 and 21 so that 22 beyond became great years for us and continue to be to this day. And just grateful for that.
Mm. Yeah, you're right about the 7 months later, Ash. I think everything changed for everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur or in corporate. That was the day the world shifted in the pandemic. So I can only imagine, hey babe, we're gonna go do this, and then boom, and ooh, how do I
Yeah.
do this? And you're inside, and you're like, man, I thought I was gonna be uh front facing talking to clients, and here they are, everybody's sheltered in place. So yeah, I think we'll all have that time, Ash, where we reflect on, hey, where were you when?
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I'll tell you though, in a strange way, I'm grateful for that season because it really forced my thinking around being resourceful and having some grit and some scrappiness of launching a startup basically during, during some
Yeah.
crazy, crazy times. Looking back on it now, I loved it. Now, in the moment, it was incredibly stressful and a bit daunting to think about, man, how long are we going to be in this thing? I remember at the beginning of beginning of COVID when we were like, this will come and go in a couple of few weeks, and then all of a sudden we're like months into it, and
Hmm.
the whole calculus had changed.
Yeah.
But I would tell you that I wouldn't trade how that experience shaped and refined and ultimately forged my spirit, forged my thinking around, and even just how I run business now. That was a highly instructive time.
Oh, that's so good, Ash. Ash, speaking of how you run business with Lionheart, so you've got advisory services, executive coaching, leadership development. Ash, what's your process? You're inside a company, you have a client. We all know, like John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership. What
Certainly.
types of conversations are you having with leaders? And now, by the way, here comes AI. What conversations are you having with leaders, and what do you really try to get them to focus on or consider? Because I know everybody, we all know in coaching you ask powerful questions, but what is that like when you're talking to customers?
Yeah, certainly. And I'll tell you this is this is so true about leadership today, just as it was, say, even 50 years ago, and perhaps even longer, is despite our technological advances of phones and high-speed internet and all these other things that have made our life more efficient and communication tools that have allowed us to drop geographic barriers. Nothing beats relational capital, relationships,
Mm,
building authentic relationships across both your work world and I would argue even in your personal world. I think about the older I get, the only currency I have to trade is my relationships.
mm,
And that's not to say I don't have technical knowledge. I got plenty of technical knowledge. But at the end of the day, when I think about what makes the world go around, and you could argue this both in business as well as we're seeing this in geopolitics, we're seeing it in other places of the world where relationships matter. And
mm,
if I've become a zealot of anything as I've gotten older, it's what are you doing, Mr. or Mrs. Executive or senior leader or even high potential leader, to develop relationships and build muscle memory around that discipline year over year versus
mm,
I got all this other work I got to do over here. I'll get to relationships later. And then all of a sudden we're 10 months into the year and I haven't really done anything around building my relational networks. And I'm not talking about being transactional, and I'm not talking about quid pro quo and all this other things about, having to feel like you have to give to get and all that.
mhm,
This is more about, am I building authentic relationships so that when the day comes where I may need to tap somebody on the shoulder, or I may need to ask for something, or they may need to ask something of me, I'm not in the middle of a brand new or an unknown relationship. I've actually done some spade work along the way to help
mm,
grow that. So it is an anchor point for what I talk to customers about, whether they are a senior executive or whether they are a high potential leader that one day will be a VP, one day will be
mhm.
a C-suite leader.
Wow, that's huge, Ash. What would you say, Ash, when you're having these conversations? And I 100% agree with you on the relationship capital. What are the top issues or concerns that you hear from leaders? You're asking the powerful questions, Ash, and they're like, Ash, I would do that if only for XYZ. What are leaders saying? What are they concerned? What keeps them up at night in 2026 today?
Yeah, it's this one's been interesting to watch post COVID. So for all we talked
Mm.
about during COVID, you think about what happened during COVID.
Yeah.
Our days extended. The beginning and the ends of our days, our bookends got wider on that one.
Mm.
We started earlier and we ended later, not because of anything other than we could. We were working from
Mm.
home, we were remote, we were doing a lot more work and the lines got blurred about when
Yeah.
days started and when days ended. Now, coming out of COVID, we also found that we were doing, over time, we were doing more work with less people. And it
Mm.
wasn't because of a technological edge or an efficiency edge. It was just we hadn't hired back yet either in some cases. We hadn't hired back enough people yet, or we were going to be fairly cautious in our hiring. So then
Mm-hmm.
we were going to just make do with what we had and produce at a high level. Well, one of the things that is affecting folks and they're thinking now is burnout.
Mm.
Can we sustain this when we normalize high double-digit rates of growth as regular everyday performance? Over
Mm.
time, people get burned out with that. People
Yeah.
get frustrated with that. People will say, you know what? It's not worth the trade. It's not worth the trade of the toll that it's taking on my health, the toll that it's taking on my relationships at home, the toll that it's taking on me, say, not being able to take as much vacation or not being able to enjoy my vacation because I've always got one ear to the ground on what's going on back home
Mm-hmm.
because I'm worried about, I don't want to inherit some awful storm when I get back from vacation.
Mm.
It's a crazy cycle that we're in right now.
Well.
The other piece front and center is around succession planning. There is
Mm.
just um, such a clamoring for, are we ready? Is the next generation of up and coming leaders ready to take the reins? For all we heard about baby boomers and even older Gen X, all those folks have done very well in recent years, but their exit from the workforce is not happening as rapidly as some millennials or perhaps even younger Gen Zs would like to see because they're holding
Hmm.
on to their jobs. And you could argue maybe it's financial, maybe it's identity based, maybe it's something else. But in
Hmm.
some cases, you have people that are sitting in roles a little bit longer, and now you've got that next generation that's getting a little bit antsy. So if they're not going to do it at their current organization, they're going to find somewhere else to scratch their itch and continue to
Mm.
grow and continue to flex their leadership muscle. And so I think having good succession plans and being very intentional about talent planning and leadership readiness and just that kind of career mobility is a huge issue right now.
Mm.
And then the last thing I'll point to is there's different schools of thought on what I'm about to say, but this whole idea about generational management across
Mm.
the workforce right now. We have baby boomers, we have X, we have millennials, we have Gen Z, and now soon to be Gen Alpha will come of age here in the next couple of years. And I guess you could look at, I shouldn't discount Warren Buffett this way. He's in a generation ahead of baby boomers. So we
Hmm.
have multi-generations in the workforce right now, and getting people to successfully lead teams that have that kind of diverse thinking, diverse thought, diverse life experiences, and not just diversity through the lens of gender and race, but through the lens of how did that person grow up? What is their worldview based on the generation that they grew up in? Now, that combined with, having a full understanding of if we were even just generationally agnostic, how do we motivate and lead teams of people who are of vastly different ages and vastly different points of view on things? Because I've
Yeah.
met plenty of people who are in that younger millennial range that
Hmm.
they're actually baby boomers trapped in a Gen Z or in a younger millennial body. They think like a baby boomer, but they might be 28 years old.
Yeah.
So it is. I hate putting labels and stereotypes about if you're Gen X, you're this, or if you're a baby boomer, you're that. At the end of the day, we're people, and
Yeah.
everyone's got their own motivations. And really, sometimes as a leader, you have to take the time to understand what matters to the people that you're leading. And that sounds so basic and so
Hmm.
pedestrian to say. And at the same time, the business, the speed of business and the rate and the volume of work that's out there drowns this conversation out because we're just so busy trying to get stuff done. I don't have
Mm.
time to think about, and taken to an extreme, I really don't care what Jason thinks about this. I got a bunch of other stuff I got to get done over here. We can talk about
Hmm.
all that other touchy-feely stuff later.
Yeah.
And and I would say that topic is getting a lot more attention. And it's real. It's very
Yeah.
real.
Wow. Ash, that's huge. Burnout, generational management and teaming, and then succession planning. Man, that is those themes will probably continue to get even bigger, dare I say, as the months, weeks, and years drive on. Ash, as we get ready to close here, we know that you do a lot. What are some exciting things you have coming up in February or the springtime here in 2026?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. First of all, on the personal front, I participate in a men's ministry called Solely Business. I know you're familiar with them, and It's a men's ministry that we both love, and I have the opportunity to speak to their Florida chapter in April around the topic of priorities, and I can't wait. I'm so excited about going down to Florida and speaking with those guys down there. So certainly excited about that. Um, I'm involved in a career ministry here in Alpharetta called C3G, Christ-Centered Careers, and it's a jobs ministry, and it basically helps folks that are unemployed or underemployed or seeking transitions, helps them to think about their search a little bit differently, and allows
Mm,
us to walk alongside them and just provide support, both tactical support as well as spiritual support to folks who are in a fairly stressful time in their life. So super excited about that. I'm taking on a bigger role in that ministry this year and um, excited about that. And then lastly, something that's been on my heart, and this spurred out of a client meeting and client engagement that I had about a year and a half ago, is that I took on my youngest client who was in his late 20s. Now,
mm,
keep in mind that the work that I do normally on executive coaching is usually reserved for folks that are, excuse me, that are in their late 30s to say mid 50s. That's probably a pretty
got
good
it.
range of who gets executive coaching support. This gentleman worked for a tech company and or works for a tech company, and he just very smart, very technically solid. And the company brought me in to really help him think a little broader and deeper around his executive presence, around his communication style, around how does he deal with conflict. He's going to be a future people leader over there as well. And uh, just I was so encouraged by my engagement with him because he was early enough in his career where he was just hungry to learn and hungry to
Mm,
put into practice the conversations that we would have. And not that I was solving anything for him. My job as a coach is to help him think differently and to ask questions and to really sort of draw out answers that he himself actually had,
yeah.
and then giving encouragement and confidence around, okay, so how do you put that into action? And it was one of the
Hmm.
most fulfilling engagements that I had had because I thought, now this is great because in 10 years, this gentleman is going to be doing a lot of great things. And the fact that his company invested in him this early in his career gave me a lot of encouragement that there's a pretty big cadre of leaders that are out there that are in that sort of late 20s to I'd say late 30s age range. And I hate to put an exact date or an exact age on it,
Hmm.
but that bracket or decade, there are a lot of people that are exceptionally talented in that group that are
Yeah.
hungry for greater leadership development, that are hungry for coaching, and whether it's in a one-on-one or in a group setting. I'm excited to find more of where those people are alongside my core coaching practice.
That's awesome, Ash. Never a dull moment for Ash Merchant, ladies and gentlemen. I love it. Ash, before we go, what's the best way? You've given so much wisdom, practical things people can take away, and even provided some opportunities for some mindset shifts. So thank you for that. What's the best way people can connect with you?
My social media of choice is LinkedIn. So
Hmm.
Ash Merchant, I'm on there, and if you find me and do even a search on Lionheart Partners, you'll I don't have a corporate page, but it'll link to me personally there. So happy to connect there. My email is ash@lionheart.partners, ash@lionheart.partners. So email or LinkedIn is either one is fine for contact.
Well, folks, you know how to reach Ash. Ash, I can't thank you enough for hanging out with us here on the Fortified Life. This was great. We'll have to do it again. You know, you and I are going to talk
I will see
much
you very
more
soon, my friend.
offline. Indeed, we'll be
Hey,
seeing each
keep
other
doing
very
this,
soon.
man. You're doing a great work here, and I'm grateful, and I know your listeners are grateful too.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, folks, that's all we have time for here on the Fortified Life podcast. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. The Fortified Life on YouTube, Fortified Life podcast on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Leave a positive review if you can for what God is doing here on the show. But you know how we leave things. Don't compartmentalize your faith and the marketplace. And remember, from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. We'll have all of Ash's information in the show notes. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.